everybody. Welcome back to the Spurs Insider Podcast. I'm Mike Finger here with Jeff McDonald and Tom Orsborn in our roundtable format. We've got, it's one of the down months in the NBA season, but we've got some interesting tidbits to talk about, including a schedule and some Team USA. And just to start out, I want to remind everybody to check out our coverage at expressnews.com and sign up for our free, gratis, no cost to you Spurs Nation newsletter. You can sign up for free and get all of our stuff every day, and I know you guys are going to be into that. Topic number one for the week, let's talk about the schedule. They're playing every team in the NBA this year. Not sure if anybody's surprised by that, but every team in the NBA is on the schedule at least twice.
So what do you think? Let's guess their record.
The record of the San Antonio Spurs?
Let's guess the record. That's fun. Everyone likes that.
We're just going to dive right into it, huh?
Let's go game by game. Win-loss. Figure out their record.
That sounds like one of the worst podcasts of all time, which would unseat one of our previous podcasts. Just one? Yes. What, Tom, since you're actually taking this somewhat seriously, what jumps out at you at the brand new Spurs schedule?
Well, we talked in our previous podcast, maybe one or two back, we talked about that first month of the season, the early schedule, and how important it would be for this team given the toughness of the Western Conference and so many improvements there. And you know, right off the bat, they've got the Clippers, they've got the Lakers, they've got Golden State. Of course, Golden State isn't the Golden State we've known over the years, but you know, one good thing is you got the Clippers with Paul George hurt after the shoulder surgery. He's out probably the first 6 weeks of the season. You get the Lakers early, you know, while they're still trying to gel with Anthony Davis and LeBron, getting to know each other. But they play those two teams twice in the first 20 games. So right off the bat, you know, you can gauge yourself against them, and you're getting them at the right time.
And also, I think like this, despite those names on the early season schedule, when we talked about them wanting to pad some wins early, I think the schedule kind of works out in their favor that way. There's a lot of winnable games in that first month and a half. I mean, just starting off the bat with New York and Washington is helpful. You've got Atlanta in there. You know, a lot of non-playoff
Memphis,
teams,
Minnesota.
a lot of Eastern Conference teams. The schedule definitely gets harder, more difficult, at least on paper, as the season goes along. And I think that's kind of what you want if you're a team in the Spurs position.
And to recap what Tom was referencing earlier as to why, and this sounds so cliche, is to get off to a good start. I mean, Pop, that's the kind of thing that Pop loves when people say how important it is to get off to a good start. But the reason that's an issue this year for this team is because you would figure, as we talked about before, that a team with the continuity that the Spurs have an advantage in the early going.
Early, yes.
So you might as well make as much of that early advantage as you can, because it could be, as you said, it could get tougher as the season goes by. So let's say, we were joking earlier about a record, but let's say it's going to take 47, 48 wins to get into the playoffs. In the first half, you might need to win, 28, 29, 30, you know, because the second half's going to get tougher. So to get to that 48, maybe you need to win the most of them in the first half. And I think, again, it seems kind of ridiculous to analyze a schedule game by game this far out, but this is conducive to that type of early run.
Yes. But can we talk about the rodeo trip?
That could be where a lot of things go to die.
That's. I think that's like
The way,
torture under the Geneva Convention.
There are two ways to look at that. On the one hand, it just looks nightmarish and like they could lose every game. But another way to look at it is, if those are the games you're going to lose anyway throughout the course of the season, just get them all out of the way on the rodeo road trip and do well everywhere else. I don't know if that makes a whole lot of sense, but it seems like you're going to lose some games that are going to be tough regardless of when they happen. And if you want to package them all together on the rodeo road trip and just survive the rest of the season, that might be a way to go.
I mean, they went 2-6 on the rodeo trip last year and got it together after that. I mean, even if they go 2-6 on this one, maybe that's okay.
Run through the games for people who don't have the schedule.
It's a weird rodeo trip for two reasons. One, I don't know that they've ever had one that has 0 Eastern Conference teams on it. Yeah. So that's one reason. The other reason is it's split. It's pretty bisected or dissected by the All-Star break, and that cut is a little off this year. But before the All-Star break, you are at the Los Angeles Clippers. You were at the Los Angeles Lakers. Back to back. You were at Portland, so that's all playoff teams so far. You're at Sacramento, who was in the playoff mix until the end of the year last year and may very well be this year. You're at Denver, who was the 2 seed last year.
Then the break.
No, you have one more game, and thankfully you get to go to Oklahoma City, which, I mean, I think after losing Russell Westbrook, maybe they're not a playoff team this year, but I still don't think that is going to be a cupcake kind of game. Then you get the All-Star break, thank goodness, and then it's just 2 games after the All-Star break, which is weird. But you're at Utah, where I think the Spurs really lost by 50 at one point last year, and then you're back at Oklahoma City, that's the third reason this is a weird rodeo trip, is you're playing the same team twice on it, which doesn't happen all that often.
Really, and I realized the rodeo trip, that nomenclature kind of encompasses the whole thing of while the rodeo is going on. But another way to look at it is those first 5-6 games that you're talking about. That's the trip.
Yes.
Then the All-Star break. Then it's just a regular 2-game trip that you've taken any other point.
It's 10 days off for the All-Star break. Right. It was a little different back in the day where you basically just got a long weekend and you're back at it.
So really what we're talking about is those games before the break. The one after the break, it's just a regular 2-game trip that you take over and over throughout the course of the season.
Sure. But the nomenclature still holds.
Let's keep using that term, nomenclature. Yes.
And then you get beyond that, you get to the latter part of the season when it could come down to, clinching the playoff.
They kind of have another
exactly.
Trip.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Several tough teams.
And once again, this is in March. This is in March, beginning on March 24th. But you're at Utah, at Minnesota, at Denver, at Golden State, at Sacramento. And it kind of feels like if you're hanging by a thread going into that trip and it goes poorly, it's going to be a little difficult to dig out of it.
Their final 5 games, at Houston, Philadelphia, Houston. If you're battling for a playoff spot then, it's going to be dicey.
That's why we said to begin with the first couple of months are so key to get out to a big to kind of create a cushion for yourself and build up a lead that may not last forever in terms of the playoff seeding. One thing that I am shocked consistently over the years that people are that interested in us. And the way that the sausage is made, like we're some of the most uninteresting people in the world. But the schedule coming out meant that you two guys had to split them up. And I'm just curious, Tom, did you feel like Jeff? Because Jeff is the nomenclature. Jeff is the lead beat writer.
The backup,
and you're the backup, even though you're not a backup in any other sense of the word. I mean, you were.
I would
you were
start
a star.
for other franchises.
You would start for other franchises. Exactly. So the way this goes, and people might be interested or bored to death about
Nobody's
this.
interested.
I think they are. Jeff got to pick his games, and Tom got what 17 of the 41 road trips.
I think we're up to 18 now.
18 of the.
Do your research,
18
Finger.
of the 41 road games are going to Tommy O, and I'm curious if Tom feels slighted or if he got a fair shake in terms of what he got.
Not at all. I'm very happy. I'm very happy.
You're lucky this room is padded with eggshells, or there'd be some throwdowns going on.
I've been all over. I find enjoyment in the Oklahoma cities and Minneapolises as much as I do the other places. But, Jeff is always very generous. I've got an L.A. trip off the bat.
Living it up on South Beach
I'm very
Miami.
fond of L.A.
Just make sure you make shoot around the
After
next
all those
morning.
years at Cowboys training camp. Miami, a little beach time there.
Did you end up getting a DC trip?
DC trip was obtained, yeah.
Tom loves
Yes.
DC.
Yes.
And he let you go all international this year too, didn't he?
Yes.
Or maybe, I don't know if let was the right word, but you're doing both Toronto and Mexico City.
I knew Toronto would come my way after how things shook out over the off season. So
Yes.
But no, I'm very happy. It's going to be a lot of fun.
And while we're on this subject, just in terms of beat writer logistics, how does this? We already talked about how the schedule kind of suits the Spurs. How does it suit you guys? Is there any parts that you're dreading?
Well, there was one weird, like if I was doing the whole trip, it's a bizarre trip, just geographically. But Boston, Memphis, Toronto, Miami is a weird trip for the San Antonio Spurs.
Boston, Memphis, Toronto, Miami. That doesn't make a
weird.
whole lot of.
Now we have wisely carved that in half. Mm-hmm. But even then, like he's doing Toronto, Miami, which almost seems fun to me. Like just the two extremes.
Ice and fire. Yeah.
Ice and fire. Yep.
Anyway, I'm not sure how many people were interested in that at all, but
if you're still listening,
that seems as fascinating to me as how important it is for the Spurs to get off to a good start. Speaking of travel, I got a trip a couple of weeks ago to Team USA training camp, and I guess that's another topic for the summer is Pop at training camp. Derek White making a move where he could be part of this Team USA experience all the way through. And just to throw this out there, I mean that so many NBA stars have turned this team down, and there's perfectly legitimate reasons for that. I mean, the idea of rest and kind of pacing an athlete's body for a whole NBA season, that's gaining more traction than ever, and players don't want to put themselves through that. This World Cup is going to be in China. It's not quite as glamorous as the Olympics next year, so you can see why some players are backing out of it. But the experience that Derek White is getting from this and just the amount of confidence that he's getting, I think it could be really huge for him, not only in his personal career, but for the Spurs and just the way he kind of makes that leap next year. I wanted to get your guys' opinion on Derek and anything else Team USA you want to throw out there.
Well, you witnessed it firsthand. I was just following from afar on the Twitter and the television, but it seems like he was one of those guys that kind of rocketed up his stock rose as camp went along, just the way he performed on both ends of the floor, and I think that's why you saw him sort of get to stick around through Los Angeles and the Los Angeles portion of the training camp and have a chance to make that final 12-man roster and go to China. Just I think sort of what we saw from Derek last year during the season, once he got his feet under him, he just started to. You saw that confidence grow game by game by game to the point where he's scoring 36 in a playoff game. I think maybe you're seeing the continuation of that in Vegas and this summer with Team USA.
I think he makes it, that's not because Pop's the coach. I mean, that's the easy thing to say.
I think it's nepotism.
Yeah, right. But I think he's earned it, and his skills fit that team. I mean, defense is always important with a Pop coach team, and in international play, it's very important. So I think he makes it on his own merit.
And you can't, as you mentioned, you can't really put a price tag on what this does for his confidence and how much confidence means when you get to the NBA season. Like if he's had a good summer against this kind of competition, what that means when you put the ball in his hands and the games start to count in the NBA.
One fun thing about covering that training camp is the access is great. You can talk to everybody, and there's coaches from all over the NBA. There's college coaches there. There's retired coaches there. So you're able to kind of have conversations with people. And as a lot of those people pointed out to me, one natural reason why Derek was comfortable is because he's the guy that had already played for Pop. So a lot of the stuff they were running, he had that built-in advantage. But even that being said, there was the first day that the select team, which is basically the JV, scrimmaged against the varsity. The media wasn't allowed to see that whole thing, but I had multiple people, not just San Antonio people, but multiple people tell me that Derek was the best player on the floor that day. And then we were allowed to watch more of the one the next day, and he was just the reviews weren't as raving about his entire scrimmage, but the part that we saw, I mean, he comes on the court and it's assist, layup, jumper. He's playing with an immense amount of confidence, and whether or not he's the Spurs starting point guard next year or how he kind of fits with DeJounte Murray, this is going to pay off big time for him. And again, everybody goes through their big weeks, and maybe he's not the best player in the NBA or the best player at training camp. But the fact that he's hanging with those guys, it bodes well, I think.
How's Pop doing out there? I don't think he took this gig thinking he's going to be coaching Bam Adebayo and Derek White and
De'Aaron
Fox.
And he says he coaches the team that's in front of him. Summer Pop, as you guys both know, is the best Pop in terms of his mood and demeanor and stuff like that. And he seemed kind of excited about the challenge. Steve Kerr told me that Pop seemed just reinvigorated by the whole thing. And in terms of having to coach backups or not necessarily backups, but second choices and third choices, that's kind of been his whole career.
Sort of up his alley, yeah.
So, I mean, and I wrote this earlier this summer, a couple of weeks ago, but for as much as he's wanted to coach that team for so long, maybe he's actually better suited to coach this team where they required some coaching up. I mean, some guys who aren't necessarily first team All-NBA or All-Stars. And this is the perfect team for him to take into a competition like this. That's not to say that it won't be a huge flop and the USA will get the bronze or whatever. But I think that he likes this challenge. He likes guys who want to play for him. And like the PJ Tuckers, PJ's a guy who just I've always wanted to play for Pop. And then I couldn't wait to play for this guy. And maybe he'll never sign here or never play for him in the NBA, but for a lot of these veteran guys and even younger guys, it's their chance to play for, the winningest NBA coach of all time. And I think everybody who's there is getting the right amount of enjoyment from it and is into it the right amount. And if it doesn't have the star power of, LeBron and Russ and Steph and James Harden, at least the guys who are part of it are getting something out of it.
Don't they play Spain this week, I think, in L.A.? That'll be a good measuring stick for them, I would think.
Yeah. From what I've been able to gather, the two biggest threats are supposed to be Serbia and Spain. Yeah. So, and those are units that have played together for a long time, not necessarily like the old Manu Argentina teams that grew up together, but they've spent a whole lot more time together than this group of assorted motley NBA guys.
And then it's on to Australia.
Then it's on to Australia, where Patty Mills had invited Tom Orsborn to come to Australia to witness this, and Tom's not going to be able to make it, I don't think.
Not enough air miles, I don't think.
And then from Australia to China. So it's a heck of a summer, and you can see why players might not have wanted to be a part of that, commit more than a month basically to all this travel and competition.
And this might be the best. I've been reading, I'm no expert on this by any means, but Australia is supposed to have a pretty good squad this year too. Yeah. So I think early on you're going to see, they're going to get a feel for where they're at and what challenges lay ahead.
There's the question that a couple of reporters who were out there had asked Pop, why are you even doing this? You have nothing to prove. But I mean, he's always wanted to do this. And I mean, he loves a challenge, and he's been involved in it for a couple of years now. This was the first really event where he was coaching front and center. But Jeff Van Gundy, who's kind of handled the select team for him, Van Gundy coached a team that had to go through the qualifiers for the World Cup, and he said that Pop's been very active in terms of checking in with him, and he went and visited a couple of their practices in Houston last year, and Pop's even told us throughout the year he thinks about lineups throughout the course of an NBA season and thinks about coaching Team USA. So he's very much into this, and it's totally understandable why he'd want to be a part of it, even without LeBron.
You made mention of this in a column very recently about the 1972 team.
Yeah.
When he got cut by Bobby Knight. And we did, a few years back, we did a really in-depth look at Pop's career, and I wrote that portion of it. And I remember, the guys that were on that team and the other people that were involved with it were very shocked that happened because of his experience in Eastern Europe against the Russians with the AAU squad that he captained in an exhibition tour. I think that's rankled him to this day.
And he even a couple of things on that. So the first day in Vegas, I wrote about how he's always wanted to do this, even though he doesn't admit it. He came out and said, "This is not a job that you ever want. It's something that's kind of given to you when I serve when called," that type of thing. By the next day, the next day's media scrum, more reporters were asking him about that type of thing. And he kind of motions to me and says, he asked me this yesterday, and it's not that I didn't want to be an Olympian. Of course, I wanted to be an Olympian in 1972. I very much wanted to be part of that team. And the other note on that is Bob Knight was the coach of his team at the the Olympic trials. Henry Iba was the main coach, and Pop kind of let Knight off the hook the other day, saying, "No, it wasn't Knight's final call. He was just the guy who told me, that I wasn't, I probably wasn't going to make the team." But it would kind of be like Knight that in '72 was the Jeff Van Gundy of that group, and Henry Iba was the Pop. So it wasn't, even though Knight is the guy who went up to Pop and said, "You're not going to make the team," Knight, we can kind of let him off the hook in terms of saying Knight did not actually cut Greg Popovich. But to your point, he wanted to be part of that team.
I think
he was
Thomas
the leading.
Henderson was the guy who
Yeah.
X'd him out.
He was Pop led the
As far
Olympic
as
trials.
the roster spot.
Right. Pop led the Olympic trials in field goal percentage.
Yeah.
He had been the captain of the armed services team, I believe.
They did an extensive tour in the Czechoslovakia back then, Soviet Union, and he was well versed even then in international basketball. So
Yeah. It's any time we talk about Pop, people are interested. I think that's what I've grown to learn from Twitter and dealing with reader emails and stuff. They want to know about Jeff McDonald's travel schedule, and they want to know about Pop. We are heading into right smack dab the middle of August right now, and this is typically the time when absolutely nothing happens. But
Well, you just jinxed it. Thank you.
up until training camp starts, last week of September?
Yes.
So what conceivably could there be to look for over the next month? DeMar DeRozan?
Oh, yeah.
And just a little housekeeping. DeJounte Murray got cleared medically. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone, but
Right.
another hurdle for him that's been passed.
Yeah. But other than that, I think things should be quiet.
Well, you said DeMar DeRozan, so you might as well just flesh that out.
Just to recap that, the Spurs have not yet offered him an extension. He's got another year left. He's entering the final year of his deal. But they have not ruled out offering it to him. And something that recently came up from Bobby Marks at ESPN, I think they actually have longer to make that offer to him than we thought.
Oh, do they?
I think they have until all the way through this season to offer. So they could actually go into this season not offering him that extension and offer it to him in November or December. And that's according to Bobby Marks of ESPN. So I will attribute that.
And I guess the thinking is if he gets through the year and goes into free agency, next year's free agency class is pretty much a barren wasteland, and he might be.
He'll be one of the stars.
He'll be one of the stars, and
Yeah.
harder to resign
Right.
maybe.
So if you decide that you want to have him around, and they very much like having him around from everything that we've been told. So that's the question that will probably linger over future podcasts, and we will have a future podcast.
Are you sure there's going to be future podcasts after we've bored everyone to tears with schedule and travel
I think
schedule?
This might be our most popular podcast ever.
You think so?
People are going to demand a separate podcast, weekly updates just on the restaurants that Tom Orsborn likes to dine at on the road in all of these cities.
Do you want my like city by city rankings of the Buffalo Wild Wings in each
That's
city?
why I said Tom Orsborn and not Jeff McDonald.
But
anyway,
Detroit's kind of iffy, but the one in Orlando's all right.
Anyway,
we covered this last week, but I've heard a heck of a lot. The big buzz about the Spurs this offseason since the announcement has been about Duncan.
Yeah.
I mean, more people have come up to me and said, "What do you think about that? Do you think he could coach the team someday? Will it be him, Becky? What? Why did he do this? And they're really excited about it. They love it.
I guess we should have talked more about that. People love Tim Duncan.
Yeah.
People love.
All I can think of is there's one assistant coach I'll never get an interview.
Yeah.
The short answer to will Duncan ever be the head coach is absolutely not.
Right.
Like I would bet a lot because you can't hire a coach that you're not willing to fire.
Yep.
There's other reasons than that. Like Tim doesn't want that job. Tim's not going to be the head coach. But there is no way the Spurs ever will hire Tim Duncan to be their head coach because virtually every NBA head coach eventually gets fired. And you cannot fire Tim Duncan from the San Antonio Spurs. So let's nip that in the bud. Anyway, our time is wrapping up. We will have future podcasts. We will have another one probably within the next couple of weeks. Until then, sign up for that absolutely free. Spurs Nation newsletter. Go to expressnews.com for our Spurs coverage. And until the next time, take care of each other and keep it real.